Bienvenido a todos. This is the Paseo podcast. Today we have Monica Cruz. She is a labor reporter for Breakthrough News and an organizer based in New York City. Monica, how are you today? Welcome to the Paseo podcast.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Josh. I appreciate it.
Right on. All right. We're really happy to have you here. Before we get into the nitty gritty about your reporting, we're going to talk a little bit about some labor legislation as well. What part of Puerto Rico is your family from?
I am multiple generations deep here in the U.S. It was my great grandma, my great grandparents on both sides who immigrated from the islands. So on my mom's side, my literally directly matrilineal, I can't even talk, line is from Fajardo. And I'm actually not sure where my dad's side of the family is from. I'm not really in contact with him and his family. I have some guesses because they are Afro-Puerto Rican, and I know there's certain cities on the island where it's a much heavier density of Black Puerto Ricans. So definitely more. I need to do my 23andMe or whatever you call it.
Little DNA
But
test, yeah.
yeah, my best friend's been pressuring me to do it. She's from Peru, and she found out a lot of really amazing things about her ancestry doing that. But yeah, Fajardo is where my heart is on the island for sure. I was able to visit there once a couple years ago.
You are rooted in a really cool media outlet. It's called Breakthrough News. Can you share a little bit about the outlet, how you got started reporting for them, and how you feel the outlet is different from typical mainstream media?
Sure. So Breakthrough News is an independent media outlet. Our tagline is the media arm of the movement. And I think that is definitely what we are founded on and what we've demonstrated since we launched a year ago. We actually launched the week that New York City shut down because coronavirus. We're based here in New York. So it was a really interesting start to launch in the middle of a pandemic and have to go from doing dry runs and recording in the studio to working remotely and setting up at-home studios. But we've been pushing through and reporting on a lot of important things, really focused on, as our tagline suggests, the movements for social justice, here and all across the globe. We have done a lot of really amazing on the ground reporting. Our folks were in Minneapolis after George Floyd was killed. Throughout that same weekend, they're covering the uprising. My colleague, Eugene, my co-host Eugene, a really fantastic longtime journalist, was in Haiti reporting on the uprising there over a month ago. I was in Alabama in Bessemer speaking with union organizers and workers there on organizing for the Amazon Union, and also mine workers there on strike, still on strike at William Coal in Tuscaloosa County. So we've really been a lot of places. One of my colleagues also went to Venezuela to cover the legislative elections there a couple months ago. And we are really just rooted in a politic of uplifting the working class, uplifting our stories, uplifting our narratives and our truths and our history. And I think one thing that distinguishes us from the mainstream media most definitely is the fact that we are not owned by one of the 5 corporations that dominates our media landscape. 90% of the media we consume here in the US is owned by one of these 5 conglomerates, billion-dollar multinational corporations that, are not reporting in our interests, to say the least. So Breakthrough is more than just a media project. It's a political project to really smash through the spin, the analysis, the perspectives that we get when we turn on the TV, when we log into Twitter, wherever most of the time. We are presenting a politic that is of the left, that is really progressive, and that is rooted in an understanding that capitalism is the beast, is the ultimate enemy to the people of this world, of every corner of this world, and that we all have something to gain by fighting and struggling together and building a different future. And I'm a socialist. All the folks on the team pretty much are socialists. So that's definitely the politics that guides us. And we don't try to sit there and play around like media can be biased, because it can't. it can't
Mhm.
not be like, that's just, I think that's such a that's a lie that we're taught, that I was taught as a communications student, in college. I'm like, but how can media be biased if all of these corporations own everything we consume? It don't make no sense, right? So we're out here. I got this opportunity, through the organizing work that I've been doing since I was in college here in New York. And it was some folks that I really look up to and respect in the movement that have been trying to get this project together for a while, and, decided, the time is now. And that's how I started working for the project and how it came to be. And it's been really incredible so far. This week in particular, we've been doing some really excellent coverage on Palestine that I really would recommend that people check out, because it's stuff you really can't find anywhere else.
Everything you just mentioned, I think it shows the expansive nature of what y'all are willing to cover and the lens at which you're willing to cover that through. And to your point, I mean, if people want to, I mean, people can look this stuff up. I mean, I'm not saying anything you don't already know, but people can look this stuff up
Yeah.
about these 5 companies. I mean, even like local broadcast stations, you think they're all locally based.
Yeah.
I mean, look up
Oh
Sinclair
no.
Broadcasting. It's like literally memos that just go out to
Mm-hmm.
broadcast stations on what they're going to say. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very formulaic, and it's very much through a conservative, if not a moderate lens. So to have
Mm-hmm.
independent news outlets shaking things up and like bringing to the top, bubbling up these stories that aren't normally covered in traditional media, it's a beautiful thing. It's actually
Mm-hmm.
interesting to see kind of how the audiences are trending, where like independent media is seeing more listenership, more readership, more engagement,
Mm-hmm.
and your mainstream media outlets like your CNNs, your MSNBCs, even your Fox Newses are just kind of on this
Mm-hmm.
steep decline in engagement and audiences. So
Yeah.
there's definitely a shift
And
coming. So
people aren't dumb. People see the same talking points being reiterated. There's so many videos that have gone
oh yeah,
viral of,
totally.
those local news stations, like you mentioned. It's like clip after clip of them saying like literally the exact same thing. And also, I think one positive that I would say the pandemic has brought about is really just exposing the powers that be in a way that we haven't seen in our lifetimes, at least, and in a really long time in this country. So I think
Mhm.
people are starting to recognize that these quote unquote two sides of the coin are actually two sides of the two sides of the aisle are actually two sides of the same coin, and are really pushing forward the same interest, and are not representing what most people care about and what
Mhm.
people want to hear about.
You mentioned going to college for communications.
Right.
What was that moment when you were like, mainstream media is full of it. Like that, we need to change it up, because I mean, I'd imagine going to college for communications. There's a set curriculum. You're kind of taught to look at things through your practice through a certain way. It's like, what was that
Mhm.
moment where you were like, I want to go into journalism. I want to be a labor journalist specifically, and
Mhm.
this is how I want to report.
I was studying communications in college. I double majored in political science and communications because, yeah, I always wanted to work in journalism. I always wanted to work in media, but it, I just started to very quickly become like nihilistic and just like very jaded about the world around me, because yeah, I was learning about the media industry as a whole. I grew up watching news and was just like, all I see is just constant like death and violence and war. I was like, who's addressing this? Like, and I came to realize neither of the political parties were addressing, major political parties were addressing this, and they were very much part of it. And so it kind of coincided with my political development, really, my interest in media, and what I saw the role I could play in media was. But by the end of like my sophomore year, I was just like, honestly, screw a job in journalism. I was like, I'm going to be getting super underpaid. Like, there are so few opportunities out there. I'm not going to be able to have a say in the work that I do. Like, these huge media industries and, monopolies, whatever, like terminology I was using back then before I became a Marxist. Like, I was just like, nah, like, this is just not what I want to live with. And I want to be able to afford a decent lifestyle, pay off my college debt. And, I graduated in 2016, which is, like the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. And it's just a really dismal time. Like I was like, I'm gonna graduate, and it's like, what is the likelihood of me even being able to find a job? Like I felt so down about it, and I was like, how am I gonna survive? How am I gonna survive? Being able to live by myself in New York and stuff. So really basically by the time I graduated, I was like, I'm just committing myself to organizing. I became radically politically active in my organization, the PSL, Party for Socialism and Liberation, by the end of my sophomore year as well. So it was around that time I was just like, I'm just throwing myself into this organizing stuff because this is the only way out. This is the only way to win a better world, a better future for myself and for everyone around me, and all the things that I had been fighting for, and always feeling like I was hitting a dead end, discovering socialism and Marxist politics and actually reading Marx in my philosophy class as a college student before I actually met a Marxist organization. I'm just sitting there like, it was the same moment when we're learning about like 90% of the media we consume is owned by 5 corporations. I'm just sitting there like, am I the only one hearing this right now? Like, and that wasn't the crowds that has, because at Fordham it was like a bunch of like largely really like upper middle class like white folks, and that was another thing that really politicized me in that time of my life too, because it was the first time I was like really faced with like, wow, like there are super rich people and racism. Like it was just like, what? Like of course those were things I experienced growing up, but it was just on a whole nother level. But when I'm sitting there reading Marx, I'm like, this is reality. I was like, this is the world today. Why are we talking about this? Like it's some like far off like idea and like, just philosophical concept that has no rootedness, in material reality. So it just felt like a domino effect, and everything kind of happens, in perfect timing. But by the end of my college career, I was like, fuck trying to do a media job. Like what am I gonna get out of that? Like I'm gonna get a shitty salary. I'm not gonna be able to do the work that I want to do. I remember around that time I was getting to know in person through the movement, journalists like Ben Norton and Abby Martin, like really amazing progressive leftist journalists, talking about imperialism and doing that kind of reporting. And I would see the way that they had very limited opportunities within that small, left media world that actually since that time I feel like has really expanded. But I was just kind of like, I just felt like so hard on myself. I'm like, I'm a black woman too, like, am I even going to fit in some of these spaces? Like, it was just, I was like, I'm just going to organize full time and then just get a basic 9 to 5. And that's what I did until Breakthrough came to be. And, one of, my mentors in the movement, someone who I really look up to and has taught me a lot and been an amazing leader. And, just someone I've been able to confide in a lot over the years, like just a real OG in my life. He was just like, yo, like, do you want to be part of this project? You want to host? I'm just like, okay. I'm like, I have never done that before, but okay. I mean, maybe for making like a 2-minute long like cultural package, I did that for 1 year. I did do broadcast journalism for like a semester in college at our student run TV station. But that was all of my media experience and editing, newspapers. That was all of my media experience. I've never been on a camera doing media besides that one experience in college. I had never produced, written, and recorded and edited a whole thing. So it's been definitely a learning experience, but something that I'm so excited and honored to do. And, as someone with the politics that I have, that's literally just completely the foundation is uplifting workers and fighting for our class. I think the opportunity to be able to build with workers, to talk with workers, and to share their stories is something that, I'm just really honored and grateful to do. And it's just taught me so much in the past year. And I feel like I have a lot more to learn for sure. But that's how I got here. It's long-winded. It's a lot, but here we are.
There are moments where if a union's taking a stand, puts out a press release, goes on strike, the demonization that starts to come out of the woodwork towards those union leaders from very powerful outlets. Good example here in Chicago, we have the Chicago Teachers Union who protested a couple years back, and and I know you're in New York, so I don't know if that news like reached over to that side of the states, but
yeah, for sure.
We had a situation where we didn't have social workers in our schools. We didn't have nurses in our schools. And if we did, maybe they were there a day or two if a school was lucky. And I mean, just imagining, like, if you're a parent and you're letting your kid you're sending your kid off to school and say, well, hey, don't get hurt on Tuesdays because the nurse isn't in until, a couple days from now. They're only in on Thursdays. So the teachers union had gone on strike for a number of reasons, but those were two core elements.
Right.
And we had journalists like talking trash to them. And Monica, I tell you, I love it when like top tier news outlets think that they are like the smartest person in the room and like throw out these commentaries as if they know the temperature of the people. And we actually
Right.
had a big majority in Chicago of people that were in support of the Chicago Teachers Union
Right.
strike. So talk about like embarrassing. Well, they probably would never admit that they were wrong or they were embarrassed, these top
Right.
tier outlets or these
Oh, it's
journalists.
so crazy.
But
I'm such a huge fan. I
oh,
love the Chicago Teachers Union. They are just one of the
rock
most
stars.
radical, the most militant unions in this
Yeah.
country. They set an example to other teachers unions. A lot of my friends and people that I know in the movement here that I've organized with who are teachers in New York City public schools were just like, we need to take, our union leadership needs to take notes, and that's totally right for people to have their critiques, but no, we don't need to hear that from y'all, like
Right.
red and blue media operatives. Like, we don't need to hear that at all. But it's been really, that I appreciate how you bring that up, because it has been really particularly wild, the stuff that I've been seeing coming at the CTU. Like, y'all are so disrespectful. Like, I had my Twitter finger days in college and in high school. I'm over that. I'm too old for that, and I'll get in trouble. Ever do it by me on that, but it's like, y'all really be testing people, because get out of here.
Yeah.
Anyway, mad love
Yeah.
to the CTU.
Hey, mad love to the CTU, Stacey Davis Gates, the whole crew out there.
Mm-hmm.
They do some good work and they really stand up for the most vulnerable in our city that the powers that
Mm-hmm.
be make it a point to run on addressing the issues that
Mm-hmm.
affect our communities, especially our BIPOC communities. But when it comes down to an organization taking a stand and advocating for the resources, all of a sudden, oh, and we don't know where we're going to get the money from. The negotiating is getting a little difficult. I don't know. We
No,
can't come to a compromise. Like any excuse you could think of just comes out of the woodwork. And I think it speaks
right.
to a larger issue on our outlook for on unions. I mean, I think you had mentioned Monica, like looking at the 40s, 50s, and 60s and that decline. I mean, I'm trying to remember this exact stat, but I want to say it was the Economic Policy Institute that showed it was a line graph that showed as union membership had fallen, the income going to the top 10% had just skyrocketed, like
Mm-hmm.
out of this world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you look at before unions came to this rise in prominence, 40s, 50s, 60s. Kind of looking before that, like the Vanderbilt, the Carnegie, the Rockefeller years. There was that gap. As soon as unions started to come in, it started to kind of level out, and
Yeah.
there was some equality there.
Mm-hmm.
And just the systematic dismantling of union power and the decline in union membership, we've kind of gotten to a point where this stuff it's like politics to a certain extent, where it's almost gotten too complicated and there's so much context that we don't really have the
Mm-hmm.
language to talk about these things generally within our social circles. So I think, again, that not to blow smoke here, but I think that it really
No,
speaks to
yeah.
the importance of having independent news outlets, because
Mm-hmm.
there is a decline, and we're seeing now with our current economic status, the pandemic, there is a rising support for unions, but there's still that lack of understanding, and there's still those obstacles that if like we'll talk about Alabama in a second, in the Amazon warehouse there, that you might have people that really want to join a union, but there is a system in place that it's not necessarily makes them hesitant about joining a union because they don't want to pay dues. It's more from the standpoint of, well, if I do this, what's to prevent a corporation from just moving their warehouse? What's to prevent
Right.
them from firing me?
Right.
And yeah, we have laws that try to slap the hands of corporations if they try to intimidate people, but there's no teeth to it. There's like no
Mm.
accountability.
Nope.
And we'll talk about the PRO Act too, because that's a legislation
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited about, and I think that's going to help address a lot of these issues that prevent unions
Mm-hmm.
from forming or organizing. I did want to jump around. You mentioned you were in Alabama. I would love to hear, like, you also host the On the Picket Line podcast. I would love to hear from you, like from your reporting in Alabama, from your conversations with workers, the conversations you have on your podcast. Like, what were some of like the common themes in your conversations with workers, either on picket lines, on the podcast, when you were in Alabama? Like, what were some of the common themes you were seeing? And did you speak to any Puerto Ricans in labor, either workers or leaders? Just interested.
The first thing I think of that's a common thread, and that I think, to me, is very exciting as a socialist, and I think indicative of the changing times that we're in terms of political consciousness in this country. People know that their bosses are on vacation, are making millions of dollars, have seen their wealth in some cases triple. You know, we're talking about trillions of dollars, like a number that we cannot even wrap our minds around. Like, people see that, and people are pissed, and people are tired of management. No matter what industry you talk to, this is the same sentiment that I hear. People are tired of management just treating them like they're dumb and treating them that they're less than human. You know, people are seeing these things. It's a quote that I overuse so much in interviews, but I really love it so much. And it's a quote by Marx where he basically says that the capitalist class digs its own grave. And I think that's what we're seeing so much throughout this pandemic. Just the raw inhumanity in which they have operated. But I think just the way, the sheer brutality, the callousness, and just the arrogance that they move with, I think, to me, and again, this past year has been a turning point. And people are seeing this in ways that they've never recognized or been able to articulate before. And because we always know, I remember growing up and stuff, I was like, those corporations, like, I don't know, I was like, those rich people, like, it's like, we don't really know who they are, or like can put a name to it. You know, we can find out really quickly thanks to Google, but it's like, you know, like, we don't really know, we don't get that political education, right? But we know intrinsically through our experiences as workers, right? So people are just speaking about that in ways that it's like, as someone who's been in the movement and been around a lot of socialists and Marxists and people, you know, who our entire politics is rooted in workers' history and struggling for our class, you know, people who have never been in a political space like ours, and who are, again, are just everyday people who were galvanized to fight for their union, to fight for a union, or to go on strike, whatever, just literally because of the material circumstances that we're in. Ain't no rhetoric, ain't no Twitter, ain't no book that they've read, you know, to me has been powerful. I mean, that's always existed. We always knew that. But I think this pandemic has marked something different, because the ruling class has just gone so far, too far, and really just exposed itself. And I think another thing that ties into the PRO Act, as you were talking about, that I've noticed, and that's been a common sentiment, is the fact that people see that the system is stacked against them in every single way. And that was one thing that the workers in Alabama spoke so well to. They were like, if the PRO Act was in existence, this hellhole anti-union campaign that we went through in this BS election that was just not accurate. I can go into all the numbers and exactly the rundown and timeline of that, but that was not accurate and not representative of what the workers at the Bessemer Warehouse want. You know, they know it's because of the fact that the NLRB, as you said so well, has no teeth, has no real ability to be able to hold these corporations accountable, because that's not what this system is built to do. It's a thing we hear in the police brutality and, you know, the abolition movement. You know, like, this is not, the system is functioning as it's supposed to. The system is not broken. The system is working as it's supposed to, which is to oppress us as workers. So I think people are becoming more hip to understanding how the powers that be function and how that impacts their material reality as workers. And, you know, one just news that I'll throw in there, that was really no surprise at all. There was so much contention over at the Amazon warehouse in Bessemer, Alabama, over a mailbox that was set up outside of the warehouse front doors that Amazon said, we don't know where this came from, that has a big sign that says, vote right here, cast your ballot right here. I mean, that is just voter intimidation, union voter intimidation, like on steroids, like something that was really just unseen and really shocking. Like, we know how far Amazon is willing to go, but that was stunning to a lot of people, even in the labor movement. And it was just officially confirmed this week that who had the keys to those mailboxes the whole time? Oh, the management at the warehouse. Like, no one was surprised, but Amazon literally colluded with the USPS. They were lying. They was all lying. We know that Amazon lies, but USPS was lying too. And even with all of this, with all of every single law that Amazon so flagrantly broke during this entire process, not just in Alabama, of course, but at union drives, crushing union drives all over the country at their warehouses. One thing was just the fact that, and one thing that union organizers, when I was out, having dinner with some of them when I was in Birmingham, they were just like, the one thing that really bothers us and bothers the workers the most out of all of this is the fact that the most that happens with this union election is that it gets tossed out, that the NLRB finds that, Amazon, did that interference, and, the election gets tossed out. It's barely a slap in the wrist to Amazon. Like, they are not going to be taken to account on any of those actions, right? So I think, to me, that's one thing that has been, or a couple things that have been very common themes. People are fighting for their dignity. They are sick and tired. They understand who their enemy is, and they're starting to see what needs to be done to make union organizing and to make organizing at the workplace in general much easier today.
The beautiful thing about unions is that it can be a great coalition building effort. It's not about your background, your faith, your identity. It's about your class. It's about where you are within our society and demanding more, demanded to be treated as a human being.
That's right.
Let's talk a little bit about the PRO Act. Mm-hmm. This is a big part of the Biden administration's infrastructure package. Can you give us a quick rundown? What is the PRO Act?
PRO Act essentially is a sweeping reform of this country's labor laws, and it would essentially totally repeal right-to-work laws across every state, and includes a bunch of other measures that would increase penalties on companies found to be engaging in union busting behavior, and basically just streamline the process to start a union, among a lot of other things. So the biggest piece of it is definitely right to work, as you mentioned and you described so well. Back in March, I did a really great interview with Cooper Caraway, who is the president of the AFL-CIO in the South Dakota Federation of Labor, that unit of the union, and he did a really great job explaining the PRO Act and its history, which was really a racist history, really a tool to divide Black and white workers, specifically in the South and in the Midwest, and it was based on a lie about unions, that, unions were bad for you and unions were just like a Black communist thing, which a little bit of that was true. We talk about the Alabama communists, who created the foundation for what the Black Amazon workers, are organizing on now. But, be that as it may, it's really just going to be fundamental to making unionizing easier in this country, and really just be an overall benefit to every single worker, even workers that are not in unions. So to me, it is something that the Democrats need to just get it together, and the filibuster, like, what's going on here? There's no excuse. I already put my politics out there, and I think the Democrats are doing what their tactic always is, right? To act as if they have no options, to let the Republicans play hardball time and time again, and then say, oh, well, to do this, we have to do this. And, to do that, we have to give up on this, right? We have to toss out the $15 minimum wage or whatever it is, that week that they're capitulating on, right? After
they negotiate themselves down. It's like they can have all the cards on the table for them, like the stacks in their favor, the Dems, and they just negotiate themselves down, like the $2,000 stimulus checks. They ran on that. I'd make the argument they won Georgia by running on that. We're going to get you $2,000 checks right away. Just elect us. And what happened? well, we're going to bring it down to 1,400. And, well, if you like apply for unemployment, you get another 600. And if you do the math on that, you get 2,000.
Yeah.
And, it works out. We filled our promise. Nah.
They try to act like
Come
they
on
sent
now.
us 2 stimulus checks
Come
instead
on.
of 1 because the 600, the 1,400.
Come
Like,
on.
that's going to be the latest tagline.
I never thought I'd be in a moment where I'd say we got more money from Donald Trump than we did from Joe Biden. Like,
Yo,
that blows my mind.
that shit is real. It's real.
But some other thoughts on the PRO Act. I just was doing some research on this, and I'm a big fan of this legislation. Like we mentioned before, eliminating right to work. That means the 27 states that do have right to work laws, boom, wiped out. Immediately would make a difference for unionization efforts. Allowing gig workers to unionize. I've talked about this on the show. You might judge me a little bit, but I used to be a big wrestling fan back in the day. And I stopped, especially with, actually, I kind of watched last WrestleMania because Bad Bunny was wrestling. So I'm not perfect.
Oh my gosh, you had to, a body icon. My mom was sending me videos nonstop. I love him.
He was throwing down. I was like, all right, man, you should, you found your
calling.
calling.
Life. I was so happy for him.
I'm all for it.
Like, make your dreams come true.
Yes. But on a more like,
love you, Benito.
Of course, San Benito in the building. I was just gonna say, with wrestling, I stopped watching because I realized that they were all listed as independent contractors, meaning these men and women, or people that don't prescribe to the gender roles, like they were putting their lives on the line, doing these like very athletic, acrobatic moves, getting injured. And just in these really horrible contracts. The World Wrestling Entertainment would control what they could and couldn't do outside of work hours. If someone was injured, that was just more time added to their contract. Like some really shady stuff. But the wrestling organization could just fire them at the drop of a hat, and even put in a 90-month non-compete clause. So if you're paying for your own travel, your hotel stay, your medical expenses, for me, I just tuned out. And that was like my introduction to this concept of being an independent contractor, which is also what Uber drivers are, Lyft drivers are. A lot of gig workers are this. So with the PRO Act, that would allow gig workers to unionize. That would be tremendous. Legalizing secondary strikes and slowdowns. You mentioned the Teamster protest in New York a few months back. I mean, you could have grocery store workers protesting, and the Teamsters saying, we're not going to deliver to this place where grocery workers are protesting, and this awesome moment of solidarity that would this act would just open the doors for. Banning union busting tactics like we talked about before, and also forcing contract resolutions. We mentioned how a lot of management can come to these contract negotiations with unions and really come to them with bad faith. This would actually ensure that a resolution has to come out of these discussions one way or another. You can't just come up with an excuse, backtrack, and then you're in the same place as you started. Those are just kind of the high level things, but what a revolutionary legislation if this passes.
It's really would be a new day for labor. And I appreciate you bringing up the gig workers piece, because that's something that has been the center of a lot of just name whatever debate you want to call it. Just I would say some either straight up BS from people who are in the wallets of the gig economy giants, and those who are really there on the ground doing this work. Shout out to Gig Workers Rising, which is a really dope organization doing a lot of work around this issue out in California. I was able to speak with one of their organizers a couple of times, actually, a few months ago when I was doing video segments before On the Picket Line turned to a podcast. But you can still find those on our YouTube on Breakthrough News. And basically, she's an Uber driver, a mom, a Black woman in California who was putting in a lot of work to stop the passage of Proposition 22 in Cali, that would, basically just rolled back a really progressive reform that Cali had put into place for gig workers to allow them to file as full-time employees and have access to so many benefits, or really essentially just created a new class for them. And, it was like a record amount of money spent into the anti-proposition, or I'm sorry, the pro Proposition 22 advertising that was going on there. We're talking about Uber drivers couldn't even like log into their accounts without having to like press through like 8 slides of propaganda. So yeah, that's really, and Miss Kamala or Kapala, whatever you want to call her, Harris, actually her husband had a really big part in getting that passed in Cali, and had been like penning op-eds and stuff in favor of the proposition, just really sick stuff. But it's a very historic time for labor, to say the least, where we have people who literally down to the minute, every minute of your labor is being monetized, is being tracked right now. And I think we need to give the labor movement exactly, I'll say it again, as you said, the teeth that it needs, the real power, the punch that it needs. And that is what the PRO Act is going to give the working class of America. So we need it. Let's go. Let's do it. Senate, to get it together. We need it.
Most definitely. And, we talk about these shifts in political parties. The Democrats want to say they're the party of the working class. The Republicans want to say they're the party of the working class. So if they're both parties of the working class, then there should be no issue with the PRO Act passing.
That's right.
Let's get it done.
Doors closing.
Local media outlets are essential. In 2020, as communities, businesses, and citizens came to terms with a pandemic that disrupted the flow of daily life, the need for accurate local information escalated. Information including which businesses were open, which were closed, where to get tested and vaccinated. When media organizations closed their newsrooms and went remote, the reporting did not stop. They held local government accountable, documented historic moments for social justice, shared the humanity behind tragedy. Meanwhile, the funding for that work was drying up. Businesses whose ads helped support the media were closed. Revenue disappeared. Donating today at SaveChicagoMedia.org can ensure your local newsroom continues reporting the stories that matter despite the current economy. Investing in local media is funding your community. Give today and help us do the work that matters. Donate now at SaveChicagoMedia.org.
Super curious. You're in New York. What's your favorite place to eat Puerto Rican food?
Everyone knows Uptown Bronx Caridad is a staple. Like anytime you're trying to just get some arroz con pollo, or they had some at the spot around my old place in Harlem. They had some really good pernil. So I would say that. I wish I could give a better answer about Jersey though, but I will let you know.
It's all good.
All the spots that I go to, I don't remember the name of them. Growing up, I would go to Patterson, Passaic, Clifton, where my family is from, I will say any Puerto Rican spot, you in Patterson, you in Passaic, in Clifton, in Jersey, any Puerto Rican spot is going to be good. Period. Like maybe I might bite my tongue on that later, but growing up, I just have nothing but good memories of that.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, and I meant to mention New Jersey in there too. I totally forgot about that. You're like, you're living in there, a little hybrid. Then I think this is a common theme because we've asked this question to past guests, and mofongo seems to be like the one thing that people just get really disappointed by. It's hard to find a good spot that does mofongo real well. So anyway,
either too wet or too dry, or like the meat or the shrimp isn't good.
Dry mofongo,
the little words. But then it's like weird when it's like too wet and soggy. It's like it just needs that in between. I think that's why it's hard, and then it's so hard to actually make. But I would love to make it one day, actually. Of course, the best mofongo I ever had was on the island. That was a dream.
All right. Well, hopefully one day you get to live out that dream of making the perfect mofongo at home. And then you can share the recipe with us.
Yes.
What are you most obsessed with today? It can be related to Puerto Rican culture, unrelated to Puerto Rican culture, hobbies, TVs, movies, whatever. What are you most obsessed with today?
Everything is food related, because I was even like, honestly, that was a question that was in the back of my head this whole interview, because I'm like, like, what am I like actually like fiending for, and it has to be food, honestly. And it is this bakery in my town, West New York. They have a couple of different. They have a location in Jersey City too, and somewhere else here in North Jersey. But it's called Dolce de Leche, and it is the spot. I just moved here 2 months ago, and I live right by this spot called Bergen Line. Anyone from New Jersey or New York City knows Bergen Line. It's just a big shopping and restaurant center. It's like a whole strip of just like stores and restaurants, everything. And everywhere you go in Bergen Line, everyone has a Dolce de Leche bakery bag. Like, that is just what I've learned very quickly. And then my close friend who's from the Bronx and lives in the Bronx, she tried it and she has been so obsessed. And even though we're hanging out in the city tomorrow, she is coming to Jersey first to meet me up because she was like, I need it. And I'm like, girl, me too. I haven't been in a week. And I'm like, I need it. And it was my mom's birthday last weekend, and we got a tres leche cake from them. And it was the first time I've ever had tres leche where they put dulce de leche, a layer of it in there. And they also put fresh fruit in it. They put strawberry and peaches. It was so good. Like, it was like 4 cakes in one, and everyone was so blown away. I know. Now I'm going tomorrow morning. That's why I said we're talking about obsessions. I was like, that has to be the obsession, because that is literally like has been it. But oh my God, it's so good. If you're ever here on this side, definitely recommend Dolce de Leche Bakery. It's Argentinian actually, but they make all the standard Latino, fare classics. So it's great.
That. Okay, definitely adding that to the list if I ever make it out to NYC. Love to hear it. Okay, well, Monica, we really appreciate the time you've given us today. For people listening that want to keep up with you after they hear this interview, do you have a website people can go to, social media? Give us all the things. How can people keep up with you?
You can follow Breakthrough News at BT Newsroom on Twitter and on Instagram, and find us Breakthrough News anywhere else. We're on YouTube, on Facebook, on Patreon. Check out our Patreon. We have exclusive content that's dope, and it's spelled Breakthrough as you would normally spell it. And you can follow me on Twitter. I'm not super active on Instagram, but if you want to go ahead, give me a follow. It's at Palante Mami. We're going to say PALANTEMAMI, just in case, but I'm pretty sure most of this audience might know. Of course, that comes from the amazing revolutionary slogan, Palante Siempre. So yes, at Palante Mami on Twitter, where I'm most active. You can find all of my reporting there.
Okay. Monica Cruz, thank you so much. Labor reporter for Breakthrough News. Really appreciate you being on the show today.
We appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Doors closing.
Los medios de comunicación locales son esenciales. En 2020, cuando las comunidades, las empresas y los ciudadanos se enfrentaron a una pandemia que interrumpió el flujo de la vida cotidiana, aumentó la necesidad de información local precisa. Información que incluyera qué negocios estaban abiertos, cuáles cerrados, dónde hacerse las pruebas, dónde encontrar ayuda. Pero cuando los medios de comunicación cerraron sus redacciones y se alejaron, la información no se detuvo. Exigieron responsabilidades al gobierno local, documentaron momentos históricos para la justicia social, compartieron la humanidad detrás de la tragedia. Mientras tanto, la financiación de ese trabajo se estaba agotando. Las empresas cuyos anuncios ayudaban a sostener los medios de comunicación cerraron o se paralizaron. Los ingresos desaparecieron. Donar hoy en SaveChicagoMedia.org puede garantizar que su redacción local siga informando de las historias que importan a pesar de la economía actual. Invertir en los medios de comunicación locales es financiar tu comunidad. Dona hoy para ayudarnos a hacer el trabajo que importa. Dona ahora en SaveChicagoMedia.org.